I'm Carlos. Currently, I'm a research fellow at the University of Aveiro, as a dear chairman said, and I'm more focused on the biomechanics of human head using finite element simulations. However, during my master's, I was enrolled in a welding simulation curricular unit, which is exactly the topic of today's presentation, teaching welding simulation through case studies with Simufact. And let me begin by giving you a little bit of context behind the study. In this presentation, I will mainly talk about the simulation of welding processes course taught at my university, the University of Aveiro, by Professor Fábio Fernandes. This course is required for welding engineering major, and it is optional for mechanical engineering students, which was my case 2 years ago when I still was a student in this exact course. As objectives, students learn about welding processes as mathematical and physical models and their corresponding advantages and limitations. For the computational simulations, they are encouraged so they can interpret it with a critical mindset and be able to communicate to specialists and non-specialists. And so, as we all know, the welding processes are highly nonlinear, involves complex interactions between heat transfer, phase transformation, and mechanical deformation. And these effects lead to residual stresses and distortions, which are really important to understand for ensuring the durability and safety of welded structures. However, when this topic is taught purely theoretically, students often struggle to visualize how these physical phenomena evolve during welding. And that's why students used Simufact welding, finite element software from Hexagon, to reproduce case studies from the literature as a final project assignment. This approach not only allowed us to connect concepts learned in lectures with practical simulation experience, but also reinforced our understanding of how process parameters affect residual stress, formation, and distortion. Well, during classes, students began by learning about finite element principles, such as how interpolation functions and strain displacement relations define the formation behavior of an element. Later, they moved to nonlinear behaviors with a recap of material plasticity, phase transformations, and thermal gradients. Also, a little bit of boundary and contact conditions, such as clamping and support constraints, which help them further when moving to practice. And finally, the very important heat input, since most of the projects were about arc welding, they employed the Goldach's double ellipsoid model. So the study that I replicated was conducted by two Swedish researchers in 2009, and it focused on understanding the effects of residual stresses in T-fillet welded structures. The authors welded two plates joined by a 5mm throat and used stiffener plates that were tack welded to the main plate before the welding process. The simulations were carried out in MSC Mark and other software to compare 2D and 3D models. And as a material, they used a steel equivalent of the DH36 that was modeled as elastic plastic and temperature dependent. To validate the results, the residual stressors were measured experimentally using X-ray diffraction, which allowed them to validate the numerical models. Well, one of the main conclusions was that the 2D contact model provided results close to the 3D analysis, but only required a fraction of the computational cost, so it was more efficient. And this is the basis of the final project that I aim to reproduce the findings using Simufact. For the geometry, the base plate considered 8mm thickness, the vertical plate 20mm, and the tack plates 5mm. These models were created as SolidWorks parts and were imported to Simufact to be meshed. For that, and since they are more accurate and efficient, it was used hexahedral elements or first-order brick elements. And as we can see on the picture on the right, a refined mesh was applied along the weld region, including the toe and the root, to better capture the thermal and mechanical gradients generated during welding. For the material, it was selected one of the closest option to the DH36 steel that is available in the Simufact library, since it has similar mechanical and thermal properties, including the melting point, which is about 1500 Celsius degrees, the Poisson's ratio, and the Young modulus. Regarding the boundary conditions, the goal was to replicate as closely as possible the constraints presented in the paper, and for that, a bearing contact was applied under the base plate, allowing only in-plane motion, while two clamps at the plate applied 100 Newton compressive load to prevent vertical lift during heating. And additionally, two fixed geometries were placed on top of the vertical plate to restrict motion during the first welding pass. Regarding the welding setup, the same metal-additive gas, the MEG process, was replicated. The first weld is performed. It's followed by a cooling time of 2 minutes before starting the second weld on the back of the vertical plates. The welding parameters were kept identical, a current of 310 amperes, a voltage of 27 volts, and a welding speed of 35 centimeters per minute. The heat input was modeled with the Goldach's double ellipsoid formulation, since it can accurately represent the heat distribution, and in Simufact, to match the exact weld throat, the geometric parameters of the heat source were defined as seen in the figure on the right. And let's proceed to the results section. The thermal simulation was carried out using a refined mesh consisting of 63,500 hexahedral elements, which compared to the reference work is about 30% denser, since they use 50,000 brick elements. The total computational time for the full thermal cycle was around 21 hours, which is a lot, but back then I was using my poor old laptop, so the low CPU performance justifies this required time. But well, in figure A, we can see the tech welds being formed, and I remember that initially the gravity caused some issues, some separation between the bars and the plates, so the model required slight positional adjustments to ensure full contact. Figure B shows the simulation running midway through the first weld pass with the heat source active and shows a clear observation of the thermal gradient. And finally, figure C highlights the fusion and penetration zones, which indicated if the heat distribution and the penetration depth were consistent with what was expected. So this tool was used to confirm that the heat source and boundary setup were correctly defined. And now there should be a video running where I'm showing the thermomechanical simulation. Here I'm showing the tech welds. And now the first weld starts. And as we can see right in the end, the bars collapse inward, which caused some issues in the project later on, but I'll talk more about this later. And after 2 minutes of the cooling time, so it's under 20 seconds, we can see the second weld pass on the back of the vertical plate. And that's the simulation that was performed. So from the video, we saw that the thermomechanical simulation employed the coarser mesh, about 3,000 elements, which was necessary to manage processing time. And it took roughly 6 hours to complete, with the goal to see how the structure reacts mechanically, just like the bars deformation, but also what residual stresses and phase changes occur. In figure A, we can see the initiation of the weld bead and the penetration zone on the first fillet, while figure B shows the peak temperature distribution, the 1500 Celsius degrees, that is gradually decreasing through the plates. Figure C illustrates the phase transformation after cooling, whereby night is dominating the weld region and perlite at outer zones, consistent with typical gradients in welding. Figure D reveals the local displacement field, where the maximum deflection is about 11 millimeters in the support bars. And as I said earlier, the authors of the paper used X-ray diffraction to measure the residual stresses along the base plates and vertical plates. To mirror this approach numerically, it was created particles in the same locations and through the same path. The first one was defined along the base plates, the second along the vertical plates, right at the fusion zone, and the last path was created across the weld route to capture the stress variation through the thickness of the fillet. In the analysis of the first path, the residual stresses were measured along the base plate, and the results are represented by the orange markers in the figure on the right. In general, our results showed a good consistency with the experimental measurements, those plotted on blue markers on the left. The stress magnitudes are slightly higher in the replicated model, mainly because of the absence of initial stress states before welding, and also because of constraints inconsistencies. But on average, the results show a residual stress of 96.5 megapascals. For the second measurement, the residual stresses were extracted in the axial direction and in the normal direction along the vertical plate. The results, once again shown by the orange markers, show a poor trend to the reference curves with evident local differences. These deviations were then studied and, they likely arise from the movement of the assembly once the first weld bed was completed. Since the two grips, the two fixed geometries on top of the vertical plates, they were released, the tack welds alone were not sufficient to keep the structure completely stable during welding, and those small displacements were enough to make the particles measure not the exact same locations. And for the last analysis, the residual stresses were measured along the weld route, and the results are once again represented by the orange markers. And through the normal component, they are more consistent, showing some similarity, but there is a lot of deviation through the transverse component on the first graph on the right. Although the overall shape is of the curve follows the same trend. But once again, the deviations likely arise from the movement of the structure after releasing the fixture geometries. Beyond numerical results, one of the main outcomes of this final project was its educational value. To summarize the components that were extracted from the course, the students directly applied the theoretical principles learned in class using the Simufact software. This experience promoted active learning, since they not only were following instructions, but also troubleshooting and interpreting results from the modeling examples given prior to the project. But through the project, they better understood how boundary condition changes and mesh density can influence the formation of residual stresses. At the same time, it developed practical competencies such as geometric preparation, mesh refinement, contact setup, and validation against the literature data. But finally, working with other colleagues also fostered communication and teamwork abilities, thus showing how simulation can be a powerful pedagogical bridge between theory and practice. As for final remarks, and as I've been showing you, I believe that this course effectively transformed theory into practice. The more theoretical initial classes were soon complemented by the software where students were able to apply their knowledge. And beyond the learning by doing concept, something that I personally helped me was the visualization of complex phenomena, the phase changes and residual stress patterns. So this whole experience shows how simulation tools can aid professors to make students learn actively. Well, I finished the presentation. Thank you for your attention.